This is episode 1 of The Fellas. We'll discuss here the latest upcoming matchups for this NFL weekend, along with some sports entertainment news, and one of my favorite things to talk about, obviously, on a daily basis, sports bets. So first things first, let's kick it off with one of the two premier matchups this weekend. We have the Kansas City Chiefs versus the Miami Dolphins. And not only that, they're playing overseas in Germany. Great exposure for the NFL to keep continuing to build the game. But for me, this is big coming off of this past week's performance from both teams, but obviously the Kansas City Chiefs losing to the Denver Broncos. They played twice now in 3 weeks, and they really, in my opinion, they didn't look good either of those games. They were able to pull off the win, obviously, 2 weeks ago, but not so much this go around. And Andy Reid and team spoke about this at the end of the game. So let's take a listen to see, and we can dive in as to what this matchup might bring in store for us.
I take full responsibility for it. The guys, I saw things tonight or this afternoon that I haven't seen before from the guys. So that's my responsibility to make sure they're right, and we weren't right today.
I'll probably take responsibility for that one. Definitely take responsibility actually for losing that game, because never know if let that ball go or I catch it at the 5, wherever it was, and we go down and score, and that's it. So I just gotta be more smart, be careful with taking the ball.
Wasn't good enough. Obviously the turnovers, but just the execution in general. They have to do a good job against us with their defense, but we got to execute at a high enough level, and we clearly haven't done it in the 2 games we played against them.
Yeah, we take this one on the chin and get better from it. We don't sulk on it too long. We want to watch the film, get better from it, and prepare for a very talented Miami game, because this will be a very big game, and seeding comes to the post.
So, yeah, obviously, the team is saying all the right things, right? They're saying, hey, it's on us. We need to do better. But for me and a lot of the fans that watch the Kansas City Chiefs, if you look at their comment section, Andy Reid saying, hey, there were some things that, they did that I hadn't seen before. And I don't want to take him out of context here, because he did speak to the players on his team specifically in that statement. But the pause there made me think, hey, maybe there were some things that Sean Payton came up with in 2 weeks that really threw Andy for a loop there. And that's unlike the Chiefs, especially for somebody like Andy Reid, who's been in the league for quite a while now. I remember him, back in, I won't age myself, but, him being the Philadelphia Eagles coach and having Donovan McNabb, right, Terrell Owens making it to the Super Bowl and unfortunately losing. But he's had success. He's seen it all from a scheme perspective. And personally, I think that the Kansas City Chiefs were looking ahead to this week's game. They figured, hey, we just quote unquote, beat the brakes out of the Broncos just 2 weeks ago. It was a sloppy game, but the Broncos came to play. Kansas City did not. Pat Mahomes, had the flu. So that's not to discredit the Broncos and their win, but it's definitely one of those things where you look at it and say they were checked out. They weren't ready for that. And I think that that's what Andy was really alluding to in that sound bite, that hey, we need to stay focused week in and week out. And it's something that Tua has brought up with his team when they surprisingly laid an egg against the Buffalo Bills. And don't tell Tyreek Hill, right, that, hey, that they laid an egg, right, that they didn't play against that caliber team and an opponent in the Buffalo Bills, but rather just that Buffalo, Stephon Diggs and Josh Allen and the boys came to play that week. So for me, if you look at it, the offense of Kansas City ranked 4th. Miami's offense ranked 1st. Miami putting up just shy of 34 points per game, and Kansas City just putting up shy of 24 points per game. That obviously dipped down a bit after this last week's performance overall. But to me, defense wins championships. That's the old adage, the old motto, and that's where you look at this here. I mean, you got 8 versus 10, according to Pro Football Focus. Points allowed for Miami, 192. That puts them towards the bottom of the league overall, versus Kansas City just allowing 117. That's first place in the league. That's better than the Dallas defense. The Dallas defense gets a lot of pub, right, and a lot of recognition. But this defense for Kansas City is quietly shutting teams down, not allowing points. You want to break that down per game? That's 24 points per game allowed by this Miami defense versus 14.6. Again, best in class in the NFL goes to Kansas City. And then yards per game, 329 on average for Miami allowed to opponents versus 287 allowed by Kansas City. If you look at that, to me, the pressure is going to be on Tua and the boys to make sure that once they have opportunities, right, that they make the most of it. You don't want this to become a field goal kick versus a touchdown game. And obviously, you do want to control the clock because as high potent as this Miami offense can be, they move quick, they move fast, they're in and out. And when they score, you're leaving yourself susceptible for Pat Mahomes to just come right down the field, do the same thing to your team. So it could be one of those matchups, to where it's whoever has the ball last wins. And we'll talk about spreads here in a little bit. But to me, the key matchup, really what I'm interested in seeing is Kelsey versus Jalen. And no, not Jalen on the corner side, but Jalen Phillips in the pass rush. When these two match up in that passing game or rushing game, what is that going to look like? Jalen Phillips has 3 sacks on the season, 18 solo tackles. He was a first-round pick out of Miami for the Dolphins overall. But Kelsey's got to protect Mahomes and on that side so that, again, they can establish the running game. They can establish the short passing game on those little RPOs that Kelsey will sometimes break out of. You can't let Phillips rush by and get to Mahomes on this one. And then go into the other Jalen, right? Jalen Ramsey, first game back last week, 1 pick, obviously, that we all saw that was the highlight, but he had 3 targets, only 1 catch allowed during that matchup. And physically, we all know that Jalen Ramsey matches up best against Travis Kelce amongst any, not only corner, but defender across the league. It's been Ramsey's game to go up against Kelce one-on-one. And so it'll be interesting to see how that happens in this game. Miami should be getting back their other corner this week, so it should be the first time all season that they're in their actual true base defense, with Jalen Ramsey being able to line up in some of those matchups, not necessarily right across from Kelce, right, but cover him in those routes. I don't even think they run routes, to be honest. I think it's Mahomes saying who's open, who's not, and that's hopefully where Jalen Ramsey will be able to match up and get physical with Travis Kelce and give him a tough time. And not to poke fun at the guy, right, but they're on the road for one. I mean, it's a home road game, however you want to call it, but they are in Germany. And the main thing is that Kelsey is 2-2 since being in his relationship with Taylor Swift when she's not at the games. And I know that she's on tour right now in Argentina. I don't know if that tour will be in Europe by the time that this game is there, or if she'll make the flight. Who knows how they do things. But if Taylor Swift isn't there, chances are Travis Kelce and the boys are going to take that L. That being said, is it a must-win game? And if so, who is it a must-win game for? So let's take a look here at the AFC standings. We have the Kansas City Chiefs. We have the Miami Dolphins, Jacksonville Jaguars, and the Baltimore Ravens, all at 6-2, with Buffalo creeping in right behind them at 5-3. So we'll talk about these matchups here in a bit. But to me, the must-win, it's going to be for Kansas City. And I'll tell you why. So strength of schedule will tell you that the Dolphins have the 3rd highest strength of schedule versus the Kansas City being 5th. So they're really what for what. But to me, it comes down to the last 4 games of the season. Miami has 3 of their last 4 at home. These games are against the Jets, the Cowboys, and the Bills, and they are on the road against Baltimore. However, if you take a look at Kansas City's last 4 games, 2 games on the road, 2 games at home. They do face the Bengals and the Chargers within those last 4 weeks. But going into that last 4-week stretch, they play against the Bills, and they do have Philadelphia up next after this Dolphins game. You talk about having the potential to now go 0-3 since you lost against Denver. That's a no-no, and that's going to, for sure, take away home field advantage from his team. And that's something that Kansas City is not used to. Now, for those of you that like to bet like myself, I'll give you a little take here. So Kansas City versus Miami, this shifted today as we're recording this podcast. It was up to 2.5. Now it's down to 1.5. So plus 1.5 for Miami. Miami has covered their spreads in 6 of their 8 games so far this season. And if you're an overs guy like myself, they've hit the over in 5 of their 8 matchups so far this year. In contrast, if you take a look at the Chiefs, they've covered the spread 5 out of the 8 weeks that they've played, and only 2 weeks have they gone over in their 8 weeks. So take the data however you'd like. If I were to bet on this game, and I'm not betting on this game, I would take the Miami plus 1.5. I honestly think that Miami's going to come out on top of this week and put itself in a good position in the driver's seat to have home field advantage. And I know that a lot of teams would like that, not from only the sense of, hey, it's the Miami Dolphins and you're not going up against Kansas City, etc., but more so the weather. Florida's going to have better weather than you going into Arrowhead, early January, now that the season is 18 weeks long. But yeah, that's my bet if I were to be taking this game, but I'm not. So for me, that's going to be the key aspects, right, of this matchup, and I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to wake up early here on the West Coast. It's a 7:30 matchup. It's going to be a great ball game, close spread, and we'll see what happens come next week.
Jerry did say he didn't want to talk about the Eagles because he's learned his lesson. So
He didn't want to poke the bear.
he didn't want to poke the bear, is what he said.
Pour honey on me. I always say that, You see me and a bear in a fight, pour honey on me. So
Mr. Pour Honey on Me. So we talked about 2 premier matchups this week, right? This is your second one. Dallas versus Philly, America's team coming out, needing a win here, in my opinion. But let's dive in. So if you look at the NFC standings right now, Eagles in first place at 7-1, Detroit right behind them at 6-2, followed by Seattle and Dallas at 5-2, San Francisco 5-3. You can go on and on. The NFC is congested, and it's going to cannibalize itself here in a couple of weeks with obviously Dallas playing Philadelphia here. They also got matchups against the Lions down the road. San Francisco, they're making moves. We'll see how that NFC West goes. But for Dak, he's right on this one thing. When it comes to Philly, you can pour honey on him, and, he wants to be in that bear fight. So for Dak, he's 8-3 versus Philly lifetime, including a 7-1 record in the last 8 matchups. During those matchups, overall, he has a 98.9 passer rating, 19 touchdowns versus 8 interceptions in those 11 games. And last week, according to Pro Football Focus, Dak was the NFL's most explosive passer. That means that any pass over 10-plus yards, Dak was the best in class. He did complete 9 of 12 last week, going for 179 yards. But for me, similar to our last matchup, it's really on the defense. The Philly defense, as he's going up against, is middle of the pack. Okay? They're 19th in points allowed with 156 points allowed. They're 18th in points per game at 19.5. Passing yards, they're allowing the 7th most passing yards, just shy of 248. But here's the kicker. This is why it means more for Dallas, and really why I think it means more for Dak. They get after that quarterback. They got the 7th most sacks with 25 on the year. That's more than Dallas has brought to the table so far. Dallas has only had 18 sacks. And that, to me, is why I'm putting an emphasis on not Dallas versus Philly, but Dak versus Philly. He laid an egg, okay? He laid an egg versus San Francisco just a couple of weeks back. And Dallas needs this win because it's more of a matchup for them. They need to prove that they can get it done. And the reason I say that is that strength of schedule. When the schedule came out to start the year, wins, losses, Dallas was predicted to just have shy of 10. It was 9.7. So they could get to 10. They could get to 9. Let's take a look here at the schedule, and you tell me what you think Dallas will end up with. So, again, going into this week, 5-2. Let's say they lose against Philly, right? All right, 5-3. I believe they beat New York. I believe they beat Carolina at Carolina. And I believe they take a dub against the Washington Commanders. So that puts them at 8-3. From then on, and you got to listen closely there, from there on out, it is possible that the Dallas Cowboys could not see a win until January 7th. Let that sink in for a second. After the Washington game on November 23rd, it might be old school Dallas choke job in December, going into the month with 8 wins and coming out with 0. They finish out the month of November versus Seattle. Seattle's not to be slept on, and that's obviously a Thursday night game on Prime Video. Interesting matchup there. They're at home, of course, but still, I think this is an L. I honestly do. Then you're back at Philly. Say you lose at Philly this week coming up, and they come back into your house, they could beat you there again. Then you're at Buffalo, at Miami, and versus Detroit. We just talked about Detroit. They're 1 game out of having the top seed, and if Dallas doesn't beat Philly either week, Detroit's going to finish in that second spot, unfortunately for them. But yeah, you heard it right, folks. 5 losses in a row, and then they get a win at Washington to end out the year. They finished at 9 and what's that? 9-7, 9-8. Yeah, they finish out the year at 9-8. The pressure's on Dak. The pressure's been on Dak. The pressure has always been on Dak. And any quarterback, really, that puts on that star, it just simply means more. And for Dak, it's now or never. For Jerry Jones, it's now or never. No moves at the trade deadline. I honestly really thought, like a lot of pundits out there that are on the big networks, that they were going to go after somebody here in the trade deadline. They didn't call Tennessee at all. They didn't even inquire about Derrick Henry. Only 2 teams did. Dallas wasn't one of them, obviously. You got your San Francisco 49ers going to go and get another pass rusher, as if Dak wasn't on his back enough during that game. But that's just more. It's not just against Dallas. They know what they're facing against Philadelphia. They want to put pressure on these quarterbacks, and Dallas did absolutely nothing at the trade deadline to improve their team. I get it, okay? Wanting to believe that what's in your locker room is enough to win championships. But the other teams that have been in that pursuit, that have been in the playoffs, that have been close to getting a Super Bowl ring or been in the Super Bowl, are all making moves, and you have stayed stagnant. You believe in what you believe, but to me, the talent was obviously not there against the 49ers, and it's still not. And the talent may very well not be there against Philadelphia. To me, Philadelphia owns both the offensive and defensive lines. To me, the quarterback play has been more consistent from Jalen Hurts than from Dak Prescott. You can say, oh, Dak is 7-1 in the last 8 games. It could very well be 7-3 at the end of this year, and it's when it's mattered most. And there's going to be a lot to say after this week regarding this game, regarding the Kansas City game. But unlike those other teams, this can easily be the end of the season for Dallas if they don't get a win. They get a win, I could easily see them flipping that 9-8 to 12-5. I can easily see them doing that. Even maybe in a 13-4. But when you've lost now against the Philadelphia Eagles and the San Francisco 49ers, and basically the 2 strongest teams that you faced all year, and you can't compete, or at least if they don't compete in this one, then to me that just takes out the air out of whatever defense strength you've had, whatever momentum you had on offense, whatever Texas coast, whatever they want to call it, offense momentum that you might have been gaining. And honestly, it should be the end of Mike McCarthy at the end of the year if this team goes 9-8. Yes, Jerry Jones is the GM. Yes, Jerry puts a squad together with his son and his grandkids and daughters, wives, whoever the hell runs his team. But the talent on the field hasn't been there in the sense of who they're matching up against, but it's enough to be competitive. It's enough to win one of 2, and we haven't seen it. We haven't seen them beat the 49ers when it matters. We haven't seen them beat the Eagles when it matters. And this one, guys, this one matters. So what's the spread looking like? Currently, Dallas is +3. So it's a swing whichever way. Vegas thinks that they can compete and keep this one close. Dallas has covered the spread in 5 of 7 weeks, along with hitting that over in 4 of 7. And then the Eagles are 4-2 versus a spread. They do have 2 push scenarios, but they are 4-2 in those other spreads there, along with hitting the over in 4 of 8 weeks. Dallas needs to win. Philadelphia, man, Philadelphia might just pull it off, though. So we'll see. We'll have more to talk about this next week coming up. I'll do a live, I won't say a live reaction. I'll do a Monday morning quarterback style reaction and get those thoughts in for next week's podcast here. Next up, we're going to talk about entertainment. All right, it's our next segment here with entertainment, and there was a lot to talk about this week. We could have delved into so many topics. We had Lionel Messi winning a controversial 8th Ballon d'Or. For all you soccer fans out there, that's the greatest player in soccer for the year. So he won his 8th of those. We had James Harden being traded over to the Clippers. So you all know of how James is. He gains weight, decides to start to complain, and doesn't play well when he wants out. And he finally got out, and now he's back in LA. So we could have talked about that and how that could be his last stop, right? But there's something more serious that was going on, and there's a lot of, there's memes out there. There's cartoon TikToks going on. But I dove into this report, and it's troubling. And if anyone is sensitive to this type of information, this is your warning, because we're going to cover a couple of things here as far as this case has been involved so far. But it's Dwight Howard. Dwight Howard this week has been accused of sexual assault. And just as of Wednesday morning, he wanted this sexual assault claim removed or dismissed by a judge. But I went into it. I read through the timeline. I wanted to get to know what exactly was going on. Was this a bad Me Too type movement? Was this a potentially valid assault case that, I can't say it's going to ruin his NBA career because he's no longer playing in the NBA. He's overseas, but it does give answers as to why he may not be playing in the NBA overall, because it's no secret. Once you do something, people are aware of it, and this could explain as to why he's not in the league. But let me take you through the timeline here. So this report was filed on July 15th, 2022. So obviously we're a couple of months beyond the 1-year mark from that. And to me, I said, oh, well, this must have just happened last year. But in looking through it, the actual assault happened back in 2021, same month of July. So it was just a few days shy of being a year. The assault looks like it was on July 18th of 2021 to be exact. And according to the victim, he did not speak to Dwight Howard since this assault. But I want to read a quick excerpt from the police report. And again, if you're sensitive to this type of information or this content, this is your time to pause, fast forward. But this is an excerpt from that police report. And I quote, "The victim stated that he cried during the incident," the officer wrote, "and that it stopped when Howard blanked into his mouth." And I'll pause there. You can fill in that blank however you want. But that to me is on top of a lot of other parts of this report is beyond troubling. Okay. By the way, this is a male victim, in case you weren't aware. And according to the victim, he was just a fan that he thought had garnered Dwight Howard's attention in the sense of a friendship, goes over to Dwight's house, is presented with a third party, and this act is taking place in the bathroom in Dwight Howard's home, or at least where Howard was staying at this particular time. And I mean, I had to stop there. Like I could expand on more comments, but if you want more, you can simply do your research. There's plenty of articles at the moment that are going through that, but the force in nature, if you read through these articles of how that last part came to be, of when it stopped, that is beyond, how would you say it? I mean, it's unfathomable, right? That an athlete would use their size, their strength, etc., to overpower another individual, man, woman, anything in between, to get your way. Now, there's other evidence that has come out that shows a bit more of desire from the victim that puts the allegations into question. The most recent one came out a few days ago, where it's a text exchange between Howard and the victim, and what Howard is thinking about with the victim, and the victim responding that they are excited about meeting up as well. So there's two sides to this story, and I don't know if the text thread is with the actual victim, so that's why I'm still being cautious here and saying, hey, they're a victim. Now, if it isn't, then it's going to be dropped. You got to say that because, in my opinion, for what we've seen here recently, once the facts come out that there's two parties involved, one is he said, she said, and there's proof that there was actual a relationship of sorts between the two, and if things didn't quite happen how the accuser says that it happened, it gets dropped. Case in point, baseball pitcher just a couple of weeks ago. If you don't know what I'm talking about, look it up. It hinders the movement for man, woman, or anyone that gets assaulted when individuals use their platform, especially against an athlete, politician, actor, somebody that people will recognize, and it's not the case. So I had to give my speech on that, and had to present to you what everyone is talking about. Again, some people are having fun with it, but in all these matters like this, they aren't fun for anyone, especially for the true victims out there, to getting their assaulters not just necessarily behind bars, but some type of repercussion for their actions. And this is just the beginning of this case. I'm sure that it'll unravel more and more as time progresses. But that's our entertainment of the week, if you were to call it that. Next up, we have Locks of the Week, so stay tuned for that. All right, and now for my favorite segment of all, Locks of the Week. We're sticking strictly NFL here. If you want basketball, I got to give out a shout-out to a guy I've been following for a while, Calling Our Shot. Look him up on Twitter. He's also on Chalkboard and also on TikTok or anything like that as well. Kid just went, believe, 16 straight or 17 straight picks in basketball this past week. Hitting 17 straight picks on basketball is crazy. He was up 10 units for sure, at least on a couple of those days. But these are mine. These are my NFL locks of the week and how we'll kick things off here. So first up, money line. I have the New Orleans Saints versus Chicago Bears. I'm taking the Saints money line on this one. Currently at minus 420 here. And my next one, going spread here, plus 4.5. Give me the Vikings over the Atlanta Falcons. Yes, I know. Kirk Cousins, Mr. Big Chain dancing on an airplane, he's out, right? They just picked up Joshua Dobbs. Seeing him in Arizona, look, Josh, I'm not saying he's going to ball out, but he can definitely keep this offense going and keep them competitive, and that's why I'm taking them and the plus 4.5 I saw the Falcons game last week. Ritter still looks uncomfortable in the pocket at the NFL level. The running backs, they have some really good running backs. However, they tend to fade out throughout the games. And if you follow fantasy, you'll see that. They'll be at 1 point, all of a sudden they'll be at 10 points. It's just very inconsistent in the performance overall that we've seen from the offensive scheme so far from the Falcons. I don't trust it. Give me the Vikings at 4.5. Next up, we have another spread here. The Giants. Give me the Giants at plus 1.5 right now against the Raiders. Josh McDaniels is out. Okay. Antonio Pierce is the new head coach. Garoppolo still can't get Devontae Adams the ball. And just because you get rid of Josh McDaniels in a few days, it doesn't mean that you'll have a whole new team and a whole new scheme come Sunday. Give me the Giants plus 1.5. They're covering it. And lastly, money line here. Give me the Carolina Panthers securing their first away win against the Chicago Bears on November 9th. If you do this, you can 4-leg parlay it. That one unit pays out 859 smackaroos. So if you're into a little bit of stretch, I know it's 1 week and then you're diving into the next week, but to me, it's worth the wait because it's going to hit. Hey, put more than a unit down. That's it for this week's show. This is The Fellas. I was your host, Skee. Like, subscribe. Next week, we'll have some guests come on board so we can keep this conversation going around different things. But that is it. Skee out.